Vampires. They're everywhere.
That's him!
Blade is the key. All our strengths.
Blade. The movie begins in an emergency room where a pregnant woman named Vanessa is rushed in with a horrific wound. The doctors work frantically to save her, but as they fight to keep her alive, she goes into labor. A baby boy is born, but Vanessa doesn't make it. Years later, a young couple finds themselves at what seems like an exclusive nightclub. Blood suddenly starts raining down from the sprinklers above, and the man realizes too late that everyone around him is a vampire. Before he can escape, a figure arrives that makes the entire club fall silent. This is Blade, and the vampires know exactly who he is. Without hesitation, Blade begins his assault, shooting and slicing through vampires with brutal efficiency. His weapons are specially designed with silver bullets and blades, the vampire's greatest weakness. He moves through the club like a force of nature, taking down vampire after vampire with deadly precision. After cutting down most of the club, Blade corners Quinn, one of the lead vampire guards. He stakes Quinn to a wall, questions him about Frost, and then sets him on fire before casually walking out as police sirens approach. The club is left in ruins, with only Quinn's burning body and a terrified human witness remaining. Quinn's charred body is brought to the hospital and declared dead. Karen, a doctor, is assigned to examine the corpse. She immediately notices something strange about the cells and the unusually large fangs protruding from the victim's mouth. Quinn suddenly wakes up. He attacks them both viciously, biting Curtis first and then sinking his teeth into Karen's neck. Blade crashes through the window just in time, delivering a devastating punch to Quinn and forcing him to flee through another window. Karen lies bleeding on the floor, and despite the risk of exposing himself, Blade decides to help her. He picks her up and jumps through the window as police officers burst into the room and open fire. He shoots back while making his escape with Karen in his arms, disappearing into the night. Blade takes Karen to his warehouse hideout, where his partner Whistler waits. Whistler, a grizzled veteran vampire hunter, immediately begins treating Karen's bite wound with a garlic-based serum. He warns Blade about the serious consequences if she turns into a vampire. Meanwhile, at a secret vampire council meeting, held in an elegant boardroom, the elders are furious about Blade's recent aggressive attacks on their kind. They summon Deacon Frost, a younger, ambitious vampire, and scold him for running reckless nightclubs that expose their existence to the world. Frost, who was turned into a vampire rather than born as one, challenges their outdated beliefs and conservative approach. The council leader Dragonetti puts Frost in his place, reminding him that he's not a pure-blood vampire and should know his rank. This only angers Frost more, and he storms out with vengeance in his eyes. Back at the warehouse, Karen wakes up confused and explores the place, finding an impressive arsenal of weapons. She walks in on Whistler, injecting something into Blade's neck that causes his entire body to convulse. When they notice her, she tries to run, but they stop her and explain everything. They tell her about vampires and Blade's mission to destroy them. Whistler shows her special UV lights that can harm vampires and gives her a weapon called Vampire Mace for protection. He warns her that if she starts turning into a vampire, she should use a gun on herself. Karen is dropped off in the city, but she grows increasingly paranoid when she notices strange tattoos on people's necks. Back at her apartment, a police officer named Krieger is waiting for her. He pretends to be there for a statement about the hospital incident, but suddenly attacks her. Krieger reveals he's a familiar, a human who serves vampires hoping to be turned one day. Blade bursts in, having used Karen as bait. He beats Krieger and shows Karen the vampire tattoo on his neck. They search Krieger's car and find it loaded with bags of blood, but before Blade can interrogate him further, Krieger escapes. That night, Blade and Karen follow Krieger to a vampire nightclub. Blade knocks out the guard at the entrance and fights his way inside until Krieger leads them to a hidden archive in a freezer. They discover Pearl, a grotesque vampire who manages the vampire records. Pearl refuses to cooperate until Karen threatens him with ultraviolet light. He quickly reveals that Frost is planning to summon an ancient blood god called Lamagra. Blade takes a hard drive containing vital information, and Karen finishes Pearl off with the UV light. Behind a secret door, they find ancient vampire texts. Blade hears something and discovers what appears to be a frightened little girl, but she transforms and attacks him. Quinn arrives with guards and captures Blade, tying him to a column. Quinn stabs him in revenge for their last encounter. One vampire grabs Blade's sword and loses his hand to a trap in the handle. Blade reveals he's been wearing an earpiece, and suddenly, Whistler blasts through a wall. They fight their way to a subway tunnel as Whistler's bomb explodes behind them. Quinn jumps Blade near the train tracks, and Blade shoves him into a passing train, tearing off half his face. Blade and Karen escape on the train, where he injects himself with a blood serum. At the hideout, Whistler finally explains the truth to Karen. Blade's mother, Vanessa, was bitten by a vampire while pregnant and died shortly after giving birth. Whistler found Blade as a lost child on the streets and almost killed him, thinking he was a full vampire. But he realized Blade was different, half vampire and half human. This gives Blade vampire abilities like enhanced strength, speed, and healing, but he can walk freely in sunlight, something pure vampires cannot do. The serum he takes regularly prevents him from developing the overwhelming bloodlust that defines vampires. Meanwhile, Frost makes his boldest move yet. He and his followers kidnap Dragonetti using sunscreen and protective gear. They rip out Dragonetti's fangs, stripping him of his pride, before exposing him to the sunrise. Dragonetti burns to ash instantly. Frost presents the fangs to the remaining Vampire Council as a declaration of war, demanding they submit to his new order. The next morning, Karen dedicates herself to developing a cure, using Blade's blood as a base. Her first experimental result is promising. When injected into vampire blood, it causes an immediate, violent explosion. While Blade is out in the city gathering more supplies for his serum, Whistler checks on Karen and delivers devastating news. She only has one day left before she fully transforms into a vampire. Downtown, Blade encounters Frost waiting for him in broad daylight, protected by sunscreen. Frost holds a little girl hostage as a shield, proposing a truce between them. He suggests Blade should embrace what he is rather than fight it. Blade refuses outright, knowing Frost's plan to resurrect Lamagra. He pulls his gun and fires, but Frost throws the innocent girl into oncoming traffic and vanishes. Blade has no choice but to save the child, losing his chance to end Frost. When Blade returns home, his worst fear is realized. He finds Whistler dying on the floor, beaten nearly to death. Frost's men have raided the hideout and kidnapped Karen. With his last breaths, Whistler explains that he decoded the stolen hard drive. Frost needs the blood of a daywalker like Blade to complete the ritual and become Lamagra. Whistler, knowing he'll turn into a vampire from his wounds, asks Blade for one final mercy. Blade, heartbroken, leaves his mentor with a gun so he can die with dignity on his own terms. Shortly after, Blade finds a mocking video message from Frost, taunting him and providing an address for their final confrontation. Devastated, but determined, he arms himself with silver weapons and Karen's exploding serum before heading out. He crashes into Frost's headquarters on a motorcycle and shoots every guard on the first floor. On the next level, he fights two martial arts experts and injects them with the serum, making them explode. When Blade finally reaches Frost's chamber, he's shocked to see his mother, Vanessa, alive. Frost reveals he was the one who bit her years ago, and she's been his lover ever since. The distraction allows Frost and his men to capture Blade. Blade and Karen are taken to an ancient temple. Blade is strapped into a machine that begins draining his blood, while Karen is thrown into a pit where her zombified co-worker Curtis attacks her. She beats him with a bone and climbs out. Meanwhile, Frost positions the council members around the temple as Blade's blood pours over them. Lightning strikes, killing the council and transferring all their power to Frost, transforming him into the blood god. Karen finds Blade weak and dying in the machine. She frees him and convinces him to drink her blood, which instantly restores his strength. Vanessa arrives and tries to manipulate Blade, but he fights and kills her without hesitation. Blade then rushes upstairs and destroys Quinn in seconds. Empowered by real blood instead of serum, Blade tears through Frost's guards with savage fury. Karen shoots Frost's girlfriend with the vampire mace, while Blade recovers his sword and engages Frost in an intense sword fight. Blade cuts Frost into pieces, but Frost's new god powers allow him to regenerate instantly. Frost overpowers Blade, and stabbing him does nothing. Blade spots the serum vials at the bottom of the pit and retrieves them with his sword. He injects all of them into Frost at once, causing the vampire god to explode completely. On the roof, as dawn breaks, Karen offers Blade the cure she developed. He refuses, explaining that curing his need for blood would remove his vampire abilities, and he needs them to continue hunting vampires and protecting humanity. Later, in Moscow, on a snowy night, Blade appears ready to save a woman from another vampire attack. His war continues. Thanks for watching till the end. Your support keeps us going and helps us bring more awesome stories to life. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and stay tuned for the next movie on Addict Recap.